Greetings everyone, my name is Adam Haritan, and today I'd like to share with you some recent wild mushroom finds that I think you'll really enjoy. So I've been traveling the past several weeks, leading all different kinds of mushroom programs throughout the Northeast, and of course one of the benefits of traveling for me is being able to see and document and film a wide range of fungal species in all different kinds of habitats. And in this video I'd like to share with you some of the more interesting mushrooms that I've recently filmed. Now keep in mind as you watch this video that not all the species in this video are edible. Some of them are edible and some of them are actually quite delicious edible mushrooms. Some of the mushrooms in this video are inedible and a few of them are toxic. So as you watch this video, definitely keep your ears open and pay attention so that you do not make any mistakes. And to simplify matters, I'm going to categorize the following mushrooms in this video based on morphological features. So we are going to start with Polypore mushrooms, then move on to Bolete mushrooms, then Gilled mushrooms, then Gomphoid and coral fungi, and then we are going to finish off with toothed fungi. Sound good? Let's get started. So we are going to start off with Polypore mushrooms, and polypores are among our most significant decomposers of woody material. Now Polypore fungi, which are also known as shelf or bracket fungi, mostly grow on wood, though a few species do grow terrestrially. And polypores are so named because the undersides of their caps are comprised of many pores, which are actually the openings of tubes. The first mushroom in this group that we'll discuss is the appropriately named beefsteak polypore, Fistulina hepatica. This mushroom literally looks like a slab of raw meat on the side of a tree, and if you don't think that's true, then take your knife and slice this mushroom into thin strips. And look how closely the beefsteak polypore resembles meat. Now the beefsteak polypore shouldn't be confused for the beefsteak morel, the latter of which is a member of the Gyromitra genus that typically appears during the spring months in North America. The beefsteak polypore, on the other hand, is found summer through autumn in eastern North America, and it grows directly on wood, especially on living or dead oak and chestnut trees. Now when fresh, the cap of the beefsteak polypore is an unmistakable pinkish red to blood red color, though this color will become reddish brown in maturity. When cut in half, you will see that the inner flesh of the cap is whitish when young, and it soon becomes juicy and streaked with dark red zones. Again, very reminiscent of raw meat. The underside of the beefsteak polypore contains closely spaced tubes that are separated from one another. This feature isn't always easy to see with the naked eye, but if you use a hand lens or if you look really closely, you will see these discrete units of tubes or pipes whose walls are not joined together. Because of this unique feature, many taxonomists and mushroom enthusiasts don't actually consider this mushroom to be a true polypore mushroom. Rather, the beefsteak polypore may be more closely related to cephaloid fungi. And cephaloid fungi are small fungi that have cup to tube-shaped, often pendant, fruiting bodies. Regardless of taxonomical placement, the beefsteak polypore is edible, and I personally prefer to marinate thin strips of this mushroom in vinegar and olive oil, then cook these on a cast iron skillet for a few minutes on each side. The flavor is a bit like cooked, though somewhat tangy, portobello mushrooms. Another polypore mushroom that you're very likely to find while exploring the woods during the summer and autumn months is Berkeley's polypore. This mushroom belongs to the globally distributed Bondartsevia genus, which contains around 11 species of fungi. And the genus name Bondartsevia is named after a Russian botanist and mycologist with the last name of Bondartsev. Also, the species name celebrates a 19th century British mycologist and plant pathologist by the name of Miles Joseph Berkeley. So Berkeley's polypore, Bondartsevia berkelii, is one of the few fungi whose genus and species names both reflect people, specifically those who had a major impact on the developing science of mycology. This large, cream to tan colored polypore is a parasitic and saprotrophic fungus found at the bases of oak trees and other deciduous trees. And because of its overall appearance, fruiting habit, and season of fruiting, Berkeley's polypore is often confused for the maitake mushroom, the latter of which is also known as hen of the woods or Grifola frondosa. However, Berkeley's polypore, unlike the maitake mushroom, can have individual caps that grow up to 10 inches across or greater, and entire fruitings of Berkeley's polypore can grow up to 3 feet across or greater. Now the Berkeley's polypore is surprisingly edible when young, though this mushroom is mostly inedible, as it matures unless you harvest the cap margins, or turn dried specimens into seasonings, or incorporate them into stock. However, keep in mind that Berkeley's Polypore tends to become bitter with age. The last Polypore that we'll discuss in this video is one that shatters the myth that there are no toxic polypores, because this one right here is toxic. This is the tender nesting polypore, Hapalopolis nigilans, also known as Hapalopolis rutilans. And this mushroom contains a significant concentration of polyporic acid. Consumption of this toxic fungus has been associated with dysregulation of central nervous system function, as well as kidney dysfunction. Initial symptoms of tender nesting polypore toxicity include abdominal pain, nausea, vomiting, and headache, followed by neurological symptoms including vertigo, loss of muscle control and balance, drowsiness, and visual disturbances. So you definitely do not want to consume the tender nesting polypore. But if you're interested in positively identifying this toxic fungus, here are some key features to keep in mind. The tender nesting polypore is a small, fleshy annual mushroom that grows directly on hardwood sticks and logs, typically during the spring, summer, and autumn months. Each cap of this fungus can be up to 5 inches wide. The stalkless cap is some shade of cinnamon brown to orangish brown, and it's typically semicircular to fan-shaped in appearance. A very important feature of the tender nesting polypore is that the texture and consistency of the cap is soft when the mushroom is young and fresh. Older specimens, however, will have caps that are drier and corkier. The underside of the cap contains pores that are colored like the cap, and occasionally these pores will bruise to a darker color. An important feature to note with the tender nesting polypore is the color change that occurs when you apply a drop of potassium hydroxide to any of its surfaces. Upon doing this, the mushroom will turn a beautiful lilac or lavender color. And interestingly, another symptom of toxicity after ingesting this mushroom is having violet-colored urine. So don't ever eat the tender nesting polypore, but I encourage you to learn how to properly identify it so that you can find it, appreciate it, and not confuse it for anything else. The next group of mushrooms that we'll explore is the bolete group of mushrooms, and boletes are generally recognized as having soft, cushiony caps in fertile areas comprised of spongy, removable layers of tubes and pores. Boletes mostly arise from the ground, and they largely form ectomycorrhizal associations with trees. Now, whenever we find a wild mushroom that fits these general characteristics, it doesn't take us too long to categorize such a wild mushroom as a bolete mushroom, but putting a genus and species name on it is a different story altogether. Bolete mushroom identification can be very tricky, even with access to prime specimens and resources. Fortunately, there are several wild bolete mushrooms that can be easily identified, including the two that we're about to discuss. The bolete mushroom pictured here is placed in the Tylopolis genus, and the Tylopolis genus is one of the largest and most widespread ectomycorrhizal genera in the bolete order of fungi. Species in this genus typically feature caps that are dry, pore surfaces that are usually whitish when young, becoming pinkish to pinkish brown at maturity, and solid stalks that lack partial veils or glandular dots. This particular Tylopolis species is Tylopolis plumbioviolaceus, the violet gray bolete. This beautiful, medium-sized bolete can be found summer through autumn in eastern North America, growing terrestrially in association with hardwood trees. The violet gray bolete has a cap that can grow up to 6 inches across, and this cap is typically purplish when young and grayish-brownish in maturity. The underside of the cap contains a pore surface that is whitish when young, and as the spores mature, the pore surface becomes pinkish tan. As beautiful as this mushroom looks, the violet gray bolete is very bitter tasting and is therefore, unfortunately, not considered to be edible. Now, the violet gray bolete is not the only bolete in eastern North America with bitter tasting flesh. There are actually several of these quote-unquote bitter boletes that are placed within the Tylopolis genus. This one, however, Tylopolis plumbioviolaceus, is one of the few bitter boletes that features purplish colors overall. The second bolete mushroom that we'll discuss is very unbolete-like in that its fertile structures are comprised of gills rather than tubes and pores. This particular mushroom is the gilled bolete, Polypores rhodoxanthus. It's edible, and it belongs to a diverse genus that contains predominantly gill-like fungi rather than poroid fungi. There are an estimated 70 to 85 species within the Polypores genus. These mushrooms are primarily distributed throughout the tropics, though a few Polypore species grow here in North America, including Polypores rhodoxanthus. This particular gilled bolete is very characteristic of a bolete mushroom when viewed from the top, because of its soft, cushiony cap, which is dull red to reddish brown. And this mushroom is very characteristic of a Polypores species when you observe the underside. Take a good look underneath the cap, and you will see bright yellow gills that are decurrent, meaning these gills run down the stalk. And you will also see lots of interconnecting cross veins between the gills. Now, it's important to unearth the entire mushroom when attempting to positively identify this Polypores mushroom, because you have to observe the color of the mycelium located at the base of the stalk. Polypores rhodizanthus contains yellow mycelium, while a related species, which is nearly identical, contains white basal mycelium. Speaking of gilled mushrooms, let us now turn our attention towards some wild mushrooms that unquestionably contain gills. Clearly, that gilled bolete that we just talked about does contain gill-like structures, though that mushroom is still taxonomically considered to be a bolete mushroom. The following two mushrooms are considered to be gilled agaric mushrooms, ones that are commonly encountered during the summer and autumn months in wooded habitats. The first gilled agaric mushroom that we'll discuss is a member of the Russula genus. Now, I gotta tell you, Russula mushrooms can be almost impossible to identify down to the species level in the field, because the Russula genus is poorly researched in North America. Here in North America, around 332 Russula species have been described, with an additional 87 European species believed to be present on the continent. The total number of species reported to grow in North America, therefore, is around 419, though the actual number of North American Russula species is suggested to be 3 to 4 times that amount. Despite the mystery surrounding this genus, there are a few Russula mushrooms whose identities are not so cryptic, including this mushroom right here. This species is the quilted green Russula, and it belongs to the Russula parvovirescens group. Now, Russula mushrooms in general are characterized by having fruiting bodies that are very brittle, and this species is no exception. By the time this mushroom is mature, the cap is already missing a few pieces, the stalk may have a few holes in it, and the gills may be partially eroded. The quilted green Russula is unique in that its overall size is relatively small, its cap is green, and the cap features a patchwork pattern. The gills of Russula parvovirescens are white, and they're directly connected to the stalk, and the stalk of this mushroom does not contain a ring, nor any sac or vulva at its base. Russula parvovirescens is edible when cooked, though it can be difficult to find undamaged specimens, and then to get these undamaged specimens home without breaking them into 100 pieces. I have the best luck finding these mushrooms underneath oaks and other hardwood trees. The second gilled agaric that we'll discuss is a mushroom that is commonly encountered in oak forests during the summer and autumn months. This one belongs to a genus containing mostly mycorrhizal fungi, and this genus is estimated to house between 900 to 1,000 species worldwide, with over 500 species currently described in the literature. And of course, I'm talking about the Amanita genus. This particular Amanita mushroom is Amanita parsivolvata. Now, at first glance, this mushroom resembles two other Amanita mushrooms. The first being the classic fly agaric mushroom, Amanita muscaria, and the second being the American Caesar mushroom, Amanita jacksonii, and its relatives. However, Amanita parsivolvata, the mushroom featured here, is distinct from those other two groups of fungi based on several key morphological differences. Amanita parsivolvata contains an orangish red cap decorated with a few white to yellowish patches. Sometimes, though, the patches will be absent depending on the age of the mushroom. The stalk of Amanita parsivolvata is yellowish, and it lacks a ring entirely, so there is no partial veil remnant that encircles the stalk. Also, the base of Amanita parsivolvata is only slightly bulbous, and it lacks a distinct sac-like vulva. This mushroom contains creamy to yellowish gills that are not attached to the stem, and the spore print produced by Amanita parsivolvata is white. Now, this mushroom is not recommended for eating because it is suspected to be toxic, so definitely keep Amanita parsivolvata out of the frying pan, but appreciate it for all that it's doing to assist in the health of oak forests. The next assemblage of fungi that we'll briefly touch upon is the superficially grouped gomphoid and coral fungi. More specifically, we are going to feature two members of the Gomphales order. Now the Gomphalles order is a rather large group of ectomycorrhizal and saprotrophic fungi spanning 3 families, 18 genera, and around 336 species. Most species in this order exist in temperate zones in the northern hemisphere, though plenty of tropical and subtropical species exist as well. The first fungus in the Gomphalles order that we'll discuss is one that sort of looks like a chanterelle at first glance. Though upon closer inspection, we can see that this mushroom is definitely not a true chanterelle mushroom. This is Turbinellus floccosus, though in older field guides you'll see the name Gomphis floccosus being used. Despite not being a true chanterelle mushroom, Turbinellus floccosus is still referred to as the shaggy chanterelle, the scaly vase chanterelle, and the woolly chanterelle. This is a mycorrhizal species that grows in association with conifer trees, and it's typically found during the summer season through late autumn in eastern North America. The entire fruiting body is vase-shaped with a cap that will eventually expand up to 6 inches in width. The cap is deeply depressed and full of orange to reddish-orange scales. The underside or outer surface of the scaly vase chanterelle is creamy to brownish in color, and it's comprised of forked wrinkles and folds. Here in North America, Turbinellus floccosus is not recommended for the table because its consumption has been associated with gastrointestinal illnesses like nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. However, many people do eat this species around the world while experiencing no ill effects. But because I do not eat the species and because many people recommend against eating the species, I too cannot recommend Turbinellus floccosus for the table. This next fungus is a relative of the previous mushroom, despite looking vastly different. So we're still discussing fungi in the Gomphalles order, and this particular mushroom is part of the most diverse genus within the Gomphalles order, which is the Ramaria genus. Now Ramaria species can be very tricky to identify, especially in the field, though fortunately this particular mushroom has a few key features that help us arrive at a positive ID. So which Ramaria species is this? Well, this one is Ramaria stricta, the strict branch coral or the upright coral fungus. This fungus grows directly on wood, and if you see it fruiting terrestrially, then it's fruiting from buried wood. Overall, Ramaria stricta is yellowish tan to brownish in color, and its fruiting body consists of closely spaced, vertically oriented branches that run parallel to one another. The tips of each branch end in points, rather than in crown-like depressions, and the taste of this fungus is bitter. Now, while many people in various cultures eat certain Ramaria species, including Ramaria stricta, many other people get sick eating Ramaria species. Because Ramaria mushrooms can be incredibly difficult to positively identify, I recommend not ingesting any Ramaria mushrooms, including this one right here, Ramaria stricta. And the last mushroom that we'll feature in this video is a toothed fungus, specifically one in the Hydnellum genus. Now, members of this genus are terrestrial mycorrhizal fungi with tough flesh in a fertile area underneath the cap that contains tiny downward pointing spines from where the spores are dispersed. This particular Hydnellum species is the velvet tooth, Hydnellum spongiosipes, and it can be found growing terrestrially in hardwood forests summer through autumn. This mushroom contains a velvety brownish cap that bruises darker brown when scratched or handled. The underside of the cap contains closely spaced spines, and just as we see with the cap, these spines will bruise darker when scratched or handled. And an important feature to note with Hydnellum spongiosipes is that its stalk is spongy and swollen. Now, Hydnellum species are unique in that their growing fruiting bodies will often engulf the surrounding debris on the forest floor. So it's not uncommon to see sticks, twigs, rocks, and leaf litter interspersed throughout and poking through the caps of these mushrooms. Regarding edibility, the velvet tooth is not considered to be toxic, though it's much too tough and corky to ingest. So there we have it, 10 wild mushrooms that you may have the good fortune of finding, especially if you live in eastern North America and you are exploring the woods during the summer and autumn months. Now remember, not all the mushrooms in this video were edible. Some were edible, some were inedible, and a few of them were toxic. But regardless of edibility status, all the mushrooms in this video are worth appreciating, not only for their good looks, but also for the good deeds that they're performing in ecosystems that look like this. And last but certainly not least, don't forget to also harvest trash every time you're out here harvesting mushrooms as a way of reciprocating the gifts that are offered to you. It doesn't take a lot of time to do something like this, though doing something like this can result in huge changes, especially if other people see you doing something as simple as harvesting trash and stewarding a particular piece of land that you love. So thanks again for watching this video. If you appreciated it, if you liked watching it, then feel free to subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can also head on over to learnyourland.com, sign up for the email newsletter so that we can stay in touch. Thanks again. I'll see you on the next video.